Reunion, a vessel for Pan-African unity, is an invitation to community conversations which serves to heal the rifts in the African diaspora caused by centuries of colonial violence and displacement. This project is inspired by my own history and that of my ancestors, known currently as John Randolph's freed people, and their relatives who were freed by his brother Richard Randolph from a nearby plantation and experienced a different trajectory. This project is part of my life's work, and it explores the separation of Black people from our home, heritage, language, and families by violent acts of colonialism, and shows how the experience has impacted Black communities' ability to remain intact. The art serves as a vehicle for conversation, understanding, healing, and liberation. And as much as possible, these conversations will include food. The seed that became the inspiration for this project began with a handful of red clay from Roanoke Plantation in Virginia, the land where my ancestors were once enslaved. And as an artist and theologian, I wanted this clay to tell their story. I began by using that first handful of clay as a colorant for my pottery. From there, I started returning to Roanoke Plantation 2 or 3 times a year to harvest buckets of the rich red clay. And I have the current landowners, the Willis family, to thank for their hospitality. I brought those buckets back home, filtered out all the debris, extracted the water, and now had a harvested and useful new clay to work with. I was even able to make a tiny flower pot and return to Roanoke Plantation to gift the owner's son, Sam Willis, with his favorite succulent. There was a steep learning curve using this type of clay, and I had plenty of anxiety. But with that, I was able to make this much progress. On the wheel and in the sculpting process, this clay was brittle. It cracked and also fell apart. It could not hold its own weight. I connected that experience to be a physical manifestation of how colonization had interrupted our communities and weakened our resistance against oppression because we were separated. Uniting clay from Roanoke Plantation with the clay I obtained from my cross-cultural immersion in South Africa, I throw and sculpt vessels which have the consistency and strength to stand as one complete work of art and history. This display includes photographs, vessels, music, and food, which all tell stories. The photographs were contracted by my professional photographer friend, PJ at Josford Photography, who has a keen eye for story and emotion. Similarly, the vessels carry stories of various people in the diaspora. This growing collection currently has 3 clay vessels made from the reunion clay. The music is a 5 to 8 song soundtrack produced by MTSO's own David Swank. And as we said, these gatherings include the common meal or the community meal. And this is just a photo of my studio whiteboard, which lists the various vessels that I have made and or plan to make. And as you can see, I'm very excited about number 8, which is a collaboration with April Sturkey Tsunami, and we'll see the formation of that later on in this video. It also shows places where we took photos, like Virginia, Maryland, Springfield, and Miami County. Reunion will have its first gallery event participating in the Black Madonna and Other Sacred Spaces, which will be held at the Urban Art Space from July 14th through August 15th, 2026 at 50 West Town Street, Columbus, Ohio, 43215. There will be a public reception on Friday, July 17th, 2026 from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Both the gallery exhibition and opening reception are free and open to the public. This exhibit will continue to be available and free to the public in art spaces in Central Ohio, and there will be a website designed for people who are not local to view and engage in the conversation. The community conversations will follow a framework to help guide discussions and keep them on track and within the allotted time frame. There is an agenda, there are facts from history, mutual understanding, and shared ideas for repair, which will make up the repeatable conversation format. This is a copy of the invitation and the agenda. The invitation is designed to be sent ahead of time to cohorts which will be invited to the conversation, and the agenda will accompany each of our discussions to keep us on track. The purpose of this project is to foster and grow the conversation of Pan-African unity. We are examining ways in which colonialism has disrupted Black communities' ability to remain intact. By examining history, we're looking for ways to correct our course and mitigate history repeating itself. Understanding that we are stronger together, just like the clay, we can work toward healing the rifts that caused our oppression and building a liberated future together. The expected outcome is that the stories that we inherited by colonization will be debunked. Our minds will be decolonized. We will discover more truths about each other and fortify ourselves to avoid a recurrence of mental and physical slavery. I understand that this is a lofty goal, so I also will know that this project is successful when I can measure quarterly how many conversations have been had and how the feedback is being received. For support in gathering that feedback, this project will develop a social media presence. One example so far of an achievable outcome has been found in the conversations that I've had with my co-learners who have taken the cross-cultural immersion trips to the American South and to South Africa. I have heard transformational accounts from my African colleagues about how their trip to the American South taught them a wealth of education about Black Americans that they did not already know. Here is a caption from Jackson Swallow, a Tanzanian co-learner who went on the cross-cultural immersion trip to the American South. You may pause to read. Before we move on to the images from the project, I just want to take a brief moment to discuss the theology that drives this work. The project is born of womanist and Black liberation theology, which understands that God identifies with the marginalized people in society. I feel particularly aligned with Harriet Tubman's belief that slavery is a sin and that God wants our liberation. Like Harriet, I believe that I am called to liberate myself and my people along with me. I also study the work of people like James Cone, Howard Thurman, and my own theology says that God is within us and works to enable us to both have the will and to do the work that pleases God, which comes from Philippians 2:13. I rely heavily on the scriptures in Isaiah 58 and in Luke's depiction of Jesus quoting Isaiah 58 in Luke 4:18, which means that I understand that the Spirit of God is calling me to free the captives and to liberate the oppressed. If justice is going to be done as on earth as it is in heaven, it's up to human beings to do the work of justice in this world. I appreciate the philosophy of Ubuntu, which is a concept that became more clear to me after my pilgrimage, which was the cross-cultural immersion course in South Africa. Ubuntu reminds me that I exist as a component of the community, and the community exists with my contributions added, which came from Bishop Desmond Tutu. And I'm compelled by the unfinished work of my ancestors to do my part toward the liberation of my people. My education in global Christian history at MTSO gave me the tools needed to deconstruct harmful theology that was used to define race as a justification for genocide and slavery. One piece of education that I'm compelled to share in our conversations is how this occurred in Pope Nicholas V's papal bull called Dum Diversus. There's still a great deal of work to be done, and the harvest is ripe. And I'm not alone in this awakening. I've witnessed my co-learners and heard their testimonies of enlightenment about the lives of those who were separated from Africa through human trafficking. And they too want to restore our unity. Colonialism has not just destroyed communities and taken people's lives. It is also at the helm of the widespread destruction of our planet. Even I am culpable as I sit here talking to you on my MacBook Air laptop, which is made by minerals which were mined by young children in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Every new iPhone upgrade is brought to us by harming the earth and children at the same time. And we have to face this together as people indigenous to the land and find a way together for a sustainable and a generative future. During reunion, we will take on these challenges in our community conversations. The project. In this picture, I am seated with my mentor, Dr. Deborah Ambush, who we're at her home in Maryland. And Deborah is my mentor by a fortuitous experience where I learned that she and I share a similar history. Our ancestors were sold into slavery to two brothers from the same family, and both of our ancestor sets were freed by those two brothers upon their deaths. And so in this photograph, Deborah is showing me a scroll with her family tree lineage. We talk about our trajectories. We talk about the way that her life and her family history has gone and the way that my life and my family history have gone, which are two wildly different trajectories. Deborah's ancestors were owned by Richard Randolph, who had a plantation called Bazaar in Virginia. And he died in the late 1700s. So when he died and it was time to resettle the people enslaved on his plantation upon his death, since it was still in the 1700s, that was under the old law where freed enslaved people could still occupy the South. They did not have to leave. And so the freed people from Richard Randolph's Bazaar plantation were resettled at a place called Israel Hill, which is located in Farmville, Virginia. They were able to have land. They were resettled on land, so they were able to have their own property. And this doesn't mean that they had a breezy time. People still would burn their houses down. People would still terrorize them. It's just that they were allowed to own their own property, which is vastly different from what happened in the 1800s. So John Randolph of Roanoke was the owner of my ancestors. And when he died in 1833, by then there was a law that freed enslaved people had to leave the state. They had to leave the South and go to either a free state or they would be settled in Liberia to recolonize Liberia. And so while that decision was made, several years after John Randolph died, which is how long it took for my people to actually go free because the will was held up in court by his siblings, it was determined that my ancestors would be relocated to Ohio. There was land that was purchased for my ancestors, in fact 3,200 acres of land in Mercer County, but an angry white mob met them there and had stolen their land by force with weapons included. And so we settled in a small settlement called Rossville at the time. And we did not get to own 3,200 acres of land, and we did not get to continue being farmers. We took jobs as domestics and just did what we could to survive. This is Lindsay Ime. He's the director of the Haitian Support Center in Springfield. And together in Springfield, Lindsay is leading the charge at the Haitian Support Center, whose vision is to see newcomers in Springfield integrate, thrive, and become self-sufficient community members. They've been there since 2023. And the Haitian Support Center's mission is to welcome and empower newcomers through education, integration, and advocacy to build a stronger Springfield for all. And Lindsay is indeed an educator. As you can see, he's pictured here teaching me about so many things. I learned some intricate details about the Haitian Revolution. I learned about Jean-Baptiste Pont du Sable, who was the first non-white person to settle in the town, which eventually became Chicago. So many different amazing things about Haiti. I was learning there from Lindsay, and just their dedication to Pan-African unity is so beautiful, and obviously goes back generations to the time when they unified so that they could liberate themselves from French colonization. Our photographer caught this beautiful depiction of so much that incorporates and encapsulates the work of reunion, which is to sit together and eat. And this photograph is taken at Keket Bongu Caribbean restaurant, which is a Haitian restaurant with wildly delicious food. Not only is the food delicious, the people are just so welcoming and so hospitable and so engaging. I was with the photographer and my friend Hadley from Ohio History Connection on this trip. And we had a wonderful conversation with this young man who then, because of my story that I told him about reunion, gave me the $10 bill that you see me holding in this picture and smiling my face off. Just because he said that he wanted to invest in this unity, this project that we're doing. And so I can't wait to go back and talk with him again and eat there and continue our discussions on how we're going to organize ourselves together as one for our liberation. So those were just a few of the thousands of photographs that our photographer PJ Ford was able to capture while we were on our travels. We will still continue to travel and get more stories and talk with more people, invite more people to the conversation. I also have a few pieces that I'd like to show you that will be in the display, and again, they're made of the reunion clay. This first one is called Alkebulan. Alkebulan is the name that the people indigenous to Africa called the continent, and that was before it was named by settler colonialists who gave it the name Africa. This is the first survivor of the reunion clay that came out of the kiln. And so here she's pictured sitting on the edge of the kiln, signifying that she survived. And this is my depiction of the American face jar. It is essentially a jar, and with a crazy face and ears. And this jar is my homage to the original American face vessels. And I'll read this from Smithsonian, which is the collection that you see here. This distinctive type of ceramic face vessel first appeared in the American South in the mid-1800s. Jugs such as these are attributed to a small number of black slaves working as potters in the Edgefield district of South Carolina. None of these skilled potters have been identified by name, and their inspiration for making face vessels is unknown. Scholars speculate that the vessels may have had religious or burial significance, or that they reflect the complex responses of people attempting to live and maintain their personal identities under harsh conditions. The earliest face vessels known to have been produced by white Southern potters were probably not made until the end of the 1800s. And so white potters working in the Edgefield area in the mid 1800s very likely saw the slave-made vessels and then co-opted the idea and made them as they moved out of the South. And so this talks about how things originate by black hands and how then they are turned into commodities. This is a communion chalice. It is still drying on my studio table, and it is made in the shape of a baobab tree. The baobab tree is also called the tree of life, and it's native to the African desert. And it is said that in many cultures, these trees are believed to house the spirits of ancestors and serve as sites for ceremonies and storytelling. And so this is the way that we will engage with our decolonized communion, where we have libations and share in inviting the ancestors to our ceremonies and our storytelling. Okay, I'm very excited about this piece, and you are getting a sneak peek because it's not finished. What you're viewing here is on a wooden canvas, and it's painted by April Sturkey Tsunami. And this is becoming a collaborative collage where I will add reunion clay 2D sculpture, two-dimensional sculpture to this canvas. April asked me for some scriptures that inspire me, and she wrote them into this painting. And one that gives me great joy is the one from Isaiah 43 that says, "I will bring your descendants from the east and gather you from the west. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not keep them. Bring my sons from afar." So this will definitely bring on some good conversations. This concludes my project. I'm Paisha Thomas. Thank you for listening, and here's my bibliography.